Okay, tell me who this. Okay, tell me who this story's about.
Got a little story about Stanley Charles Malley's brother Jim.
Okay, Charles Stanley Malley,
Charlie's grandfather.
grandfather. So William Bud Malley's dad.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
But he had a brother named Jim.
Okay.
And Jim had 4 kids. When the youngest was 7, the wife died. And now Jim was a railroader, and they had to figure out what to do with the kids. So Charlie's going to go on from there.
So for a while, some of them stayed with my grandmother Winifred, but it got too 4 more was too much to handle, and so Charles had to go to, and Raymond had to go to Boys Town.
You got to tell me who Charles and Raymond are.
Yeah, you went ahead of yourself.
Two of Jim's sons were Raymond and Charles.
Okay, so these would have been Grandpa Bud's
first cousins.
and I should say William Henry Malley's first cousins. Okay, right.
And they had to go to Boys Town out in Omaha. I think it was.
Okay, what is Boys Town?
It's a orphanage.
For young men.
For boys.
Yes, because there was a lot of death of adult parents in those days. People didn't live to raise their children because there was so much disease and so much stress.
And Charles and Raymond did not like.
But Jim was a railroader, and in order to keep his job, the children had to go somewhere.
You said Charles and Jim didn't like what?
They didn't like the orphanage.
Oh, they didn't like being in the orphanage. Yeah, I'm sure.
So eventually, Charles escaped. He's the only person in the history of
Boys Town to ever escape.
How old do you figure he was?
13 or 14.
Yeah. So anyway, he was quite a conniver. He was nobody's fool. And
I'm gonna pause this. Pausing. All right, continue.
okay. So,
Now, Jim also has 2 girls. Dorothy, that is only 7 years old when her mother died, and she lives with Stanley S. Malley and Winifred.
Charles S.
Or Charles S. Charles S. is the Stanley. And she is approximately the same age as William H. Malley. So he loved her dearly. It was like his sister, because his own sister was 11 years older than him, Isabel. Now Charlie's going to go on with the story of the boys.
No.
Oh,
Let's see.
got
Helen.
Big Helen was
Helen,
high school.
and I think she lived with the nuns.
Right. She went to the nuns here in town.
How long did Dorothy live then with Grandpa?
Till she grew up.
Oh, so she was there the whole. So in that house was Charles Stanley and then his wife Winnie, and then Isabel and Bud.
But Isabel grew up.
And then Dorothy was in that. Would they be in this house?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, they were. She was with them a lot.
Not in this house, Charlie.
Oh, no,
they lived
no.
in the
Yeah,
in the Craig house.
Oh, right. No, yeah, I'm a generation off. Sorry. Yeah, okay. And then Dorothy and then Mike Godsell too. No, Mike was with you. Okay. I'm sorry. That's
all right.
That's why we're doing this. That's a generation off. Okay. Yep.
So Big Helen, eventually she started a retirement home.
Well, she went to nursing school. The nuns sent her. She lived with the nuns and did their laundry.
And that's how she got.
That's what kept her in town. And her dad was gone when she was, like 14, 15, 16.
Well, that nursing home was fairly successful.
She had took an old hotel, and she made it into a nursing home, and she took in old men that just on their whatever they made for her Social Security, and she would have them, if they were able, she would have them help grow a garden and stuff like that.
Yeah,
They cooked,
fix stuff.
They cleaned. They kept the place running. The men did, yes, but
And
they had a roof over their head and dinner on the table every day.
And then by that time, the state of Illinois was getting into it, and they were giving her a hard time because they didn't think that the hotel was good enough for the old men living in. It was a little bit of a fire trap.
Well, and times change.
Right. And the building wasn't getting any younger.
But all the doctors in town knew that Helen
ran a tight ship.
And she kept her occupants clean
Mm-hmm.
and well fed.
Yes.
And happy.
And so the state would try to close her down
Mm-hmm.
because of the shape that the hotel was in.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually the doctors in Galesburg spoke up for her, and they said, no, our parents are with.
They had their parents,
Their own
in
parents
that
there.
nursing
Well, and
home.
what they were saying is what will come after will be worse
Yeah.
than this.
Plus, we chose her because we know she gets
Well,
things done.
and there's some poverty there, and when there's no money, it's hard to have the Taj Mahal when there's no money.
Right.
Well,
right.
doctors weren't poor, and they had
No,
their
and
moms
they still
dads
had
in
their
there.
moms there. Right, right.
And she ran that for years. And then eventually she passed away, and Dorothy ran it for the final.
Her
few
little
years.
sister did for a few years until Dorothy got sick and died.
So then now we'll go back to
Charles and Raymond.
Charles and Raymond, yeah.
and
World War II begins.
and Raymond told Dad, he says, I'm signing up for the National Guard, and Bud, you should too. If the Germans get to the border of Illinois, he said,
We'd be fighting
we're
anyway.
done anyway.
Yeah.
Well, Grandpa was farming, and his father by that time he'd had a lung
disease and a stroke.
And so Dad was doing almost all the farming, so he didn't sign up for the Guard. And
But Raymond did.
Raymond did. Well, it turns out Raymond and Charles both had to go to the war.
To Europe. Both went to Europe.
And Charles was a paratrooper.
Thrill seeker.
Yeah, well, he's the one who escaped from Boys Town.
Anything that was about to happen, he was the first one in.
Mm-hmm.
And he was even in with Hitler. He parachuted into town. Let's see, where was Hitler's main town?
Well, there was that up in the mountains in the south of Germany, which was almost in Austria.
Yeah.
We don't have to know exactly where it was, but he parachuted into Hitler's compound. Okay.
And so then he got all kinds of
loot.
Yes, and he had artwork and swords and all kinds of
weapons,
war paraphernalia.
Mm-hmm.
So then he gets the idea that he's going to make money on this.
How did he get them here?
He shipped them on the bodies of the dead Americans that were killed in the war.
Had a friend at the other end that opened the casket before it was buried.
And then they both stored all this war treasures.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, now they didn't, the war finished up for him, and they did not open up a museum. But after about 10 years, they opened up a museum. Well, then the State Department found out that they had all this war stuff, and they came in and they confiscated it.
They confiscated it, and he got in a lot of trouble. I think he went to jail for a while.
Yeah, but it wasn't necessarily being bad. He was just he was surviving.
If there were war paraphernalia coming over in caskets, I bet there was other stuff that came over in caskets too.
Oh, there's all kinds of
that wasn't on display.
Oh, they still find it, and they don't know how it got here to this day. Now, Raymond,
he was eventually he worked up to become a sergeant, and he was a tank operator. And so the story goes that Raymond, and then there was two other guys with him in the tank, and there were 5 tanks ahead of him, and they had stone fences in Europe, and they had openings in it, and that's the way that the tank usually went through. And the first 4 tanks that went through the gate, they all
were immediately blown up.
Got blown up, yeah.
So then when it came time for Raymond's bunch to come in, he looked at the other 2 guys and he said, we got to make a pact right now. This radio has failed to operate. It's not operating, and they broke the radio. And Raymond told him, you can never admit this. So Raymond and his 2 friends in the tank, their tank survived. They didn't go in. And so, there was a big hullabaloo about that. And they broke all 3 of them down to privates again. And then there they
went
had
back to peeling potatoes.
yeah, they peeled potatoes endlessly.
Sounds like a win.
Yeah, no kidding. They're still on the planet, and the first 4 ahead of them are gone.
Yeah. So they had.
But when Raymond came home, talk about Raymond when he got home, because with his horse.
Oh yeah, Raymond had horses, and then he also had mules, and they would go to like
Was he farming?
rodeos and stuff.
Was he trying to farm?
And oh no, I don't think. Well, I don't think they used the horses. No, not that he was riding horses. They didn't. He would go to the rodeos though and stuff like that. And there was some very wealthy guy, and he said, "Well, your horse can't jump over my car." He had a Cadillac, and so Raymond, I think, he took the horse.
Sounds like Evel Knievel.
And
Exactly.
he jumped the guy's car, and I think the back hoofs might have landed on the front on the hood of the car.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he made it over.
But he made it over it. Yeah.
And then he also had he would have a riding mule too, and he had that. And they had some. They used to. He went into a tavern in Galesburg, and they had the big overhead fans.
Mm-hmm.
And he rode the mule in, and he grabbed onto the fan, and he was spinning
Swung him around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean,
Wild.
He was
Drinker.
Wild. He was wild, but he had a good time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Marilyn Malley always said that they would wake up in the morning and Raymond would be sprawled out on the couch or on the floor, the living room floor, and the horse would be tied up on the porch.
Mm-hmm.
And this is in the town of Galesburg.
Yeah, in Galesburg.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Marilyn is Dorothy's daughter.
Okay. See, I never even knew that. So Marilyn is closer to us than Jim.
Yes,
Yes.
definitely.
Okay.
Okay, that's about it.
Yeah.